This, the MG ZS EV and the Hyundai Kona Electric have been primarily responsible for making people think more seriously about electric cars in India. This one has been around for a while, and the car that you see behind me is the facelifted version of the ZS EV. So it's new for the model year 2022. There have been some updates and some technical evolutions that MG has thrown into the ZS EV, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. So, welcome to Pitstop. Let's get behind the wheel and try and explore what the facelift version of the ZS EV really feels like from behind the wheel. The ZS EV has some changes on the outside, some on the inside, of course, as is to be expected from a facelift. On the outside, you'll see the entire grille section is flush, so it's now a single panel of plastic, and the charging port is a little offset, and that weirdly gives it a very distorted sort of a facial expression, and not something that I'm a big fan of. The previous generation model, of course, had the charging slot right where the logo was, and I think they should have just continued with that, because that would have been a lot better. Right now, it just kind of messes up the front a little, but well, anyway, I mean, whatever works. Then there are some changes, of course, in terms of the illumination. The front and the rears are all LEDs, and yes, it does give a little bit more of a grown-up personality when it comes to the outside view of the car. Now, when we drove the Hector, the revised Hector some days back, we were very impressed, because the quality, the difference in quality from what the Hector used to be when it first came out to what it is now is absolutely immense, and it has some very good things going for it, and that is exactly why I approached this car with a sense of expectation that things are going to be definitely a lot better than what they used to be in the previous generation model. And it's a mixed bag, to be honest. One, the quality somewhere is just not up to the mark, at least not that gives you a sense that you're driving an almost 25 lakh rupee car or a 30 lakh car. This, for example, these bits, at the rear it's even worse, but all the hollow noises that you get from the cabin, not really up to the mark at all, not suited for a car like this, or a car of this price point. And yes, there are some very good soft touch materials, like the entire dashboard is covered in this beautiful soft texture material, and does not even reflect too much into the windscreen, but everything else around is somewhat mediocre. The seats, I'm not a big fan of them. The fronts are still okay because they are shaped pretty alright, but the base is very small and the cushioning is extremely stiff. In fact, the biggest issue that I have is with the head restraints. They are very hard, and in case of a whiplash or an accident, when you hit your head onto them, it is going to cause a little bit of a damage for sure. It is very stiff, and even generally the seats are stiff. But when you step into the back, even the shape of the seat is so bland, there is no contour that you have on the seat structure, that you are going to be a little uncomfortable, and it is definitely not something which is going to hold you good for long journeys. And with the stiffer ride quality which the MG ZS EV has, it just makes the entire experience not all that great. Another thing these days that is a huge thing for people buying cars are screens, and here as well, MG could have done better. It's a missed opportunity, I must say. Yes, the screen itself is fairly big, and it utilizes the real estate very nicely. It's angled very properly as well, so it does not really catch a lot of sunlight. But the response time is not great. In fact, when it just starts up, when you press the button to get the car juiced up, it takes a lot of time to come on. And when you start using it as well, it just has that inherent lag, which is not the most ideal when you want to get into some menus urgently. So something that MG should definitely look at. And unfortunately, this is a facelift, so there is no facelift that is expected anytime soon. And yeah, I think with over-the-air updates happening, It could be a thing that they can resolve, but not anytime soon, I believe. And when you sample the camera in this car, you're going to laugh because the camera belongs to last century. It is so bad that it makes the very bad camera of the Skoda Slavia look good. And it just throws you back a couple of decades. It's really not something that belongs in the year 2022 in a car that has all the technology that is going on. But something that MG has definitely sprayed very nicely on the ZS EV are features. It has all the safety features that you can imagine. It has blind spot detection, lane change assist as well. So in terms of all that, it's very decent. All the other features also, in terms of connectivity, you get everything. Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, all the connectivity options that you may ever want to use, all that's there. But one thing again, from providing information point of view, that I'm not too taken by is the instrument cluster in front of the driver. Now, the central display is great. Yes, you have a lot of graphics going on between the battery and the motor, supplying power or gaining power back into the battery system. But the fonts could have been larger, and the real estate on the sides is just wasted. And the font, again, for the speed and the power recovery or supply is not all that big. So you get this sense of emptiness on the two sides, which again could have been used properly, and more information could have been given in a lot clearer way. We are driving this car at the fag end of the month of March in the Delhi NCR region, and it gets fairly hot during this time already. We have the AC turned to the maximum, the temperatures to the lowest, and even then, the car is struggling to keep the cabin cool. Definitely not to the level that some other cars in the segment have done. I'm talking about the Hyundai Kona EV. That does the cooling very nicely. It's very efficient as well. So this, especially the AC performance in peak summer, is going to be questionable. Not much of a substantial change on the outside, but I must definitely say that the wheels look absolutely appalling. But it does ride on some sticky Michelins, and that's what gives it a little bit of an advantage when it comes to throwing the car around some bends. But we'll talk about the handling later. Now, because this is an electric car, what matters the most are charging times. And this one has a 50.3 kilowatt hour battery. With a 7.4 input, it's going to charge in about 8.5 or 9 hours, and if you put it through a fast charger with a 50 kilowatt capacity, then it's going to give you a full juice in about 60 minutes, or rather 0 to 80% of charge in about 60 minutes or 1 hour. And that is somewhat okay. But right now, those fast chargers are available only at MG dealerships, and they will of course put a reasonably fast AC charger, not a DC charger, up at your home as well and mount it on a wall. All that is going to be free of cost. But a DC charger is only available at the MG dealerships. MG also says that with this 50.3 kilowatt hour battery, along with the synchronous motor, which is capable of 175 horsepower and 280 Newton meter, this thing is going to have a range of about 460 kilometers if you are being very light-footed. And these are ideal conditions that MG is talking about. So nothing is ideal in this world. So expect a realistic driving range of about 350 odd kilometers plus, because the last one also went between say 280 to 300 kilometers. So this one is definitely going to be a little bit up on that. There are three modes that you can choose to drive the ZS EV in. One is called normal, the other one is eco, and the third one is sport. Now, even in the eco mode, the ZS EV actually goes about in a very decent way. It has a regular amount of performance that you would want during your regular commutes. And in sport, yes, things get rapid, but that's only on the throttle input. Nothing else changes. The steering, the suspension, everything is just stock. It's only the throttle response that is sharpened and the power delivery is a little bit crisper. So you would expect a massive amount of surge when you get into sport, which happens. But I would imagine that for the most part, normal and eco are going to serve you just fine. One thing that you will definitely be playing around with a lot more is the region, and there are 3 levels to it. The first is just about okay, it's very normal, does not really make you feel that the car is braking on its own and getting the regenerative energy back into the batteries. But when you step up, 2 is a little bit more aggressive, but level 3 is when you literally feel like if you're driving along normally, you don't need to touch the brakes at all. And then we come to the ride and handling department, which is something that excites us the most. This, yes, the amount of performance that you get out of the electric motor is pretty all right. And the surge that you get, especially in the sport mode, of course, is instant. So you can enjoy this car to a certain extent. But the moment you encounter a curve or a bend, this thing kind of just raises its arms and says, hey, you know what, take it easy. It's not my game and I'm not going to play it properly if you are being violent. So the steering is kind of weird because there is literally no communication in the purest way with the driver, and it kind of feels vague at times. It does not really have the purity, and it's okay at low speeds, but the moment you start gaining pace, it just kind of loses track completely. I've just checked, there is about 50% of charge remaining in the batteries, and the range is claimed to be 168. Now, we have been driving fairly decently. We have done some very good performance runs, and for the large part, we have been driving normally as one would in city conditions. So it's a mix of performance driving and sedate driving. And if that is the range that is remaining, that means 320, 340 kilometers is definitely a very, very realistic figure. And then when you factor in the traditional way of people driving, and when you hit the highway, you largely are going to put this in cruise mode, and then the battery efficiency is going to be a little bit better. So yes, getting 350, as I said, should not be a problem.